Ofentse Pitse is the first black South African woman to conduct her own all-black orchestra. It's called Anchored Sound. The Pretoria resident says her family's involvement in the Salvation Army led her to play her first instrument, and that's in the famous brass band. So before we speak to her, let me get your sense of her work. Take a listen to this. All right, for more on her work, Ofentse joins us now in studio. That was 4 colored girls, I think. Yes?
4 women.
4 women. 4 women. That's the name of the song. Good morning. Thanks for coming through. How are you doing?
How are you?
Look at you, breaking barriers, doing the most. All right, let's start at the beginning. And it's lovely to have you on the program, by the way. Thanks for pulling through.
Yes.
You know, people, I think, typically enjoy the music. Many of us don't really understand what the conductor does.
Sure.
I'll be frank and upfront about that. So get us in to how you got into that profession as a start, and then we'll talk a bit more about, you know, these barriers that you're breaking.
Well, I should say the conducting story really happened organically, right? So as a young girl, grew up in the Salvation Army, would see how the bandmaster would conduct the brass band and all that, and the songstar leader would conduct the, you know, the songstars or the choir, that is. And then from seeing that, when I started, you know, Anchored Sound in 2017, it happened organically because I started with the choir, and then from the choir, I was like, okay, you know what, let's add a few instruments. And then one rehearsal, I was like, one Saturday during rehearsal, I was like, actually, who's going to conduct these people? Yes. So then I was like, shucks, Ofentse, that means you have to conduct them. So I then, you know, touched base and tried to figure out who was going to be my conducting mentor or coach. And then I reached out to a few conductors that I knew, like on social media and stuff, and I was like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I want to do, can you please help me? So a few of them were like, no, you know, a few of them were skeptical, but then when I got Herman Grutten, because he's the conductor of the UP Philharmonic Orchestra, and he was like a music teacher as well at the UP. He was like, definitely, I believe in what you say, I believe in you, so let me see what I can do. And yeah, he's been my coach ever since. So this is from 2019.
Wow, and look at how far you've come since then. Yeah? You know, the Salvation Army, from what I know, is a church organization.
Yes.
But they take their music seriously.
Yes.
Like really, really seriously, like rehearsals during the week type situation.
Yeah.
That helps too, right?
Yes, it helps, because I mean, I was at church, listen, Tuesday, then there's Wednesday, then there's Friday, again I have to come back on Saturday, and then Sunday is church. So I was in the church all the time. So being in there, you just have to sort of like pick up an instrument. Like you have no choice because you're always there. Yeah. So that's when you know, the interest of me wanting to play an instrument really came from sort of like always being there in the church. And I was like, okay, actually let me take up the trumpet. So that's how it started.
I'm not going to put you on the spot by asking if you're going to church today. But we're going to move swiftly along. Easter, Good Friday. I hope you do the right thing for what it's worth.
Okay.
But you know, again, conducting is something that's quite elusive for many of us. In fact, I've watched famous choirs in this country, no names mentioned, where people genuinely question if the conductor is doing anything, right? Because sometimes they get carried away in the music.
Exactly.
Like, this person watch Jaiva more than anything else. Speak to us like about, you know, what you are most worried about when you are on stage in front of, you know, in your case, an orchestra. So many different moving parts. You've got a tempo to keep up with.
Yes.
You're trying to make eye contact. You're trying to not allow your own, I guess, point of anxiety to come through. Because, I mean, what happens on stage is largely centered around you, actually.
Yes, so the conductor has to bring the best out of the musicians, and that's why the conductor's back is to the audience. So that's why the last thing you should do as a conductor is want to be seen or be the star of the show, right? And there's things that you have to learn. Like there's default settings, obviously, that you've seen with other conductors where it's like a party when they're conducting, and that's not really how you should do it. There's body control, right? And there is also how there's so many things that you communicate with your body. So how you extend your neck, that communicates how you tense your face. So if I'm doing this, I'm saying something to you, right? So I cannot do this in a happy orchestration, right? Because this shows tension. So there's those things. There's actually psychology around it that you have to know as a conductor. So before, while preparing for rehearsals or while preparing a score, I actually have to sit in front of a mirror and look at myself, right?
Wow.
And make sure that whatever I'm conducting in this, whatever phrasing or whatever dynamic, I'm actually communicating it through my body, so that the orchestra has to know that, okay, this means that and this means that. So there's so many things that are really important in preparation when it comes to what a conductor has to do. Yeah. So not everyone who's conducting is actually a conductor.
Oh, shade. Okay.
Okay, no.
I mean, what is also interesting is the ways through which different conductors do their work. I mean, would you say there's a language to this? Because,
it definitely is.
I've seen, for instance, people who, when they want a staccato, type response, their gestures are very different. And you'll explain what staccato means.
Okay, Ayanda, have you been in a choir? Because what's happening with the staccato?
I've been around the world.
Like, staccato. I mean, there is definitely a language, but there's also a chemistry, There's a spirit in music, right? I mean, when you hear a song, you're like, phew, what just happened there, So even with that, when you bring these members together, there must be a chemistry, and that's why it's so important. That's why in orchestras you find a concert master, so that's your first seat. And that's usually like the first violin, right? So you have to have like a chemistry with that person, because they relate to the orchestra what actually you are trying to portray as well, but musically, because obviously you just holding the basin, they're holding instruments.
Right.
So there's important chemistry that you have to form with the orchestra members. There's also a certain way you hold your basin, so your downbeat and where you land is very important, because if you land in a different space, then the orchestra's like, okay, what just happened there?
And the basin is what we'd call a stick.
Yeah, so it's like, so if you have your baton and this is your downbeat, like, so this is your point where you start and you end, right? So if you're doing like a 4, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
So I always have to have a point of reference, so that I'm not saying 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's like, okay, if your 4 is here, where do we land? Like, how do we bow? So it's very important to also not make mistakes when it comes to those things.
Yeah, the 4/4 time signature, very famous one. Let's speak about anchored sound.
Yes.
This is the all-black orchestra.
Yes.
Why was that important for you to create? I mean, it's beautiful, and I shudder to think that this is the first all-black orchestra. Like, where have we been?
Right, like, where have we been? So the first all-black orchestra in the world was actually formed in 1993. It's called the Gateway Festival Orchestra, right? It was formed actually by a black woman, right? She was a concert pianist. So she started this, but she wasn't conducting the orchestra. So this is in America, right? So I only found this out like late. So when you guys found out that I was the first, I also found out that I was the first. So like I'm saying, it was not part of the plan. I studied architecture, and I was like, that's what I want to do. And this was more of like a passion project for me, right? So, but being the first, really, it was really about representation, because I was like, why don't I see enough of this? I consume a lot of music when it comes to orchestras, but I'm like, okay, but where's the representation? Like, where are the people who look like me? And why are they not young? Because most orchestras are like, they're really old,
right,
like they really
Just
grow.
call them wise.
Yeah, thank you. They're wise people, right? Really wise people. So I was like, what are the young people who look like me, and they're very good at what they do. So it started with a question, then the answer was like, okay, Ofentse, you have to do something about that.
Yeah.
And then me being very sort of like, I always work hard, right, in pursuing certain things. So when I believe in something, I make sure that I pursue it, even though I may not understand. So it came also with learning a lot of things in music, learning a lot of things in conducting. I was like, okay, so let's move backwards. If this is the end goal, if I want to see this perform at the, this brand perform at the Sydney Opera House one day, let me actually work backwards. How do we get there? So then I was like, okay, so I have to be very flat-footed about this whole all-black narrative, and not just all black, but excellence also is very important, because we cannot give a kumbaya version of South Africa.
Absolutely, yeah. Very quickly, we don't often think of representation in music. Music is, and this is not necessarily a bad thing, it's thought of as this medium which breaks barriers. You're able to reach out to everyone. In fact, it's also important to think of music as a unifier. But I mean, we also, at the same token, or on the same token, need to have conversations about where the point of appeal, specifically for black people, in the type of music you're doing is at.
The points of appeal, I think also there's classical music has the power to influence how people think, how people act. So there's a lot of principles and like character building that happens within classical music, and that's why it's so important. When I got taught how to play an instrument at church, most of it was how they were grooming me to be a better person, really, beyond just the instrument. So I would say in terms of classical music, really it does that. And the beauty about it is that you have your mainstream pop genres now. You have your Amapiano that's blowing up. You have your Afro beats. Your West Kids and this really popular music that people dance to. You can actually merge that as well with classical. You can augment what the orchestra plays to any type of music, right, to make it sound beautiful, make it sound relevant. So that's the magic really in orchestra music that I think looking and moving forward, that's how we can merge the different worlds, especially with young people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we can't wait to hear more from you. Congratulations on the barriers you've already broken.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully the only way from here is up. Thank you so much for chatting to us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Ofentse Pitse is, as far as we know, the first black South African woman to conduct her own all-black orchestra. It's called Anchored Sound, and you heard it here on the AM Report.